Thank you very much, everybody, for being with us in this second day of the seminar about thinking the thoughts of Gilbert Simondon from global sound perspective, how we can think technicity from our local perspective is something important, especially for our own geography, global sound geography, because we have a history from long colonizations, many history about that, many knowledge that was deleted through this process of colonizations, many homogenization of technological development too, because we engage with Occidental technologies, so we don't use anymore ancient technologies, and how we engage ancient technology with the new technologies from our own perspectives. This is a very big discussion that we want to engage during these two days of the seminar. So it was important yesterday to have the South African table because allow us to understand how we can thinking from South African perspective, from local perspective here, our engagement with the Simondon, thinking about ensemblage or open machines or milieu, or all this technical mentality, all these important concepts and notions that we need to take into account, especially in an institution like a university, engage with all the fields of knowledge, fields of knowledge, humanities and science, etc., because as we say, Simondon was not only a philosopher from humanity, he was engaged with biological concepts to notions from biologists, from engineering, etc. So today we have the pleasure to have the Latin American table, and I will moderate this table, and I have the honor and pleasure to presenting three representing people from Latin America from different regions, one from Argentina, another from Chile, and another from Colombia. So this colleague from Latin America was important people in my own development as a researcher too. The first one, especially Javier Blanco, was my second tutor during my PhD. So I'm very grateful with him because he teach me a lot, understand that he's gonna talking now is more of the systems of the software, how the software is not only a software, engaged with many other assemblage around the software, and especially with aspects of individuals, biological individuals. So thank you very much, Javier. He's gonna be the first ponent here in this table, Latin American table. Thank you for being here, Javier. It's a pleasure to have you and listen to you. Please, welcome. And if you can introduce yourself briefly, we appreciate that too.
Thank you, Renzo. Well, I'm Javier Blanco. I'm originally a PhD in computer science. I got my PhD in Eindhoven, the Netherlands. And since almost 20 years ago, I'm working in philosophy of computing, philosophy of information, and philosophy of technology. Try to assess Simondon's thought in our country now is very important because we are like living a kind of alt-right dystopia, and our government is really is kind of very strange and dangerous radical right government. So we really need to think technopolitics, political technologies, and how this somehow is intertwined with the current utopias of the right. Well, I'm going to share my presentation. Let me see here. Let's see if this works. Oh, problem is that I'm in the end of the presentation here. Let me see. Let's go to the beginning. I will talk. I will talk of some particular ideas about software that somehow Simondon never himself developed. Because he at his time software was just beginning, and he never really focused on computers in this sense. But let me go here. But somehow his idea about technology are really, I think, suitable for understanding now this new this change in technology that happens, let's say, during the 20th century, but mostly after the appearance of internet in the 90s of last century. Simondon said that this idea, that he's in the start of the mode of existence of technical objects, he would say that the opposition between cultural and technical and between human beings and machines is wrong and has no foundation. What underlies it is mere ignorance or resentment. He uses a mask of facile humanism to blind us to a reality that is full of human striving and reaching natural forces. This reality is a world of technical objects, the mediators between man and nature. This is, I think, this also applies for digital technologies that somehow are the technology of this century. The Chinese always allow us to think about how they name things. This is Tian Now. This means electronic brain. That's the way the way that they name computers. Computers are electronic brains. Somehow the same ideas John von Neumann used to develop. We believe that this idea of a brain, of a bare brain, is not really enough to think. To think, we need more things. We need external scaffoldings, but also cultural scaffoldings. Can we understand really software as a technical object? We can review this triad element, individual, ensemble, or network, following the psychosociology of technology. Both, on the one hand, as conforming a system of a technological system, but also in the way that they interact socially. We try to understand software in its own terms, following the same ideas of Simondon. It is possible that computers and programs are not objects or technical objects, but meta objects that constitute a meta technology. It's not one technology, but a new environment in which technologies are developed, and consider, instead of technical objects, technical environments, as Eric Hurl proposed. There were some tries to understand software and this idea of element, individual, ensemble, or element, individual, network, by at least a couple of philosophers, Colin Ferrerato, for whom the elements of software will be the functions, like the procedures in a language. She studied one individual, the Mozilla, as an example of software as individual, and the communication protocols and the web would be the associated milieu, or the ensemble in which this software exists. Bernard Reader, on the other hand, would claim that the elements of software is algorithmic techniques. He would say that the idea is that one has to understand software not only as a conceptual idea, but with a history of development, and how there is a rich universe of techniques that any programmer now uses to develop software. And software in itself will be considered as an individual. Not very clear what the ensemble or network will be, or the infrastructure, mean the network, the material and informational network in which software exists worldwide, or even culture as an ensemble. I want to address the ideas of Simon Mills, who has idea of concrete software embedded in a cultural existence, but is somehow similar to these ideas. But what happened with software later is that what we are going to see now is software as connective. Software began as an individual object, but now is interconnection. And I use this other Chinese concept that is the name for cell phone. The cell phone is named in Chinese as shou qi. Shou, the first character, is hand, and qi is mechanic, machine. So they name the cell phones as a mechanic hand. It's very interesting how these neologisms for computer or software stuff are really reflect the way they see how the technology is embedded in society. Why this idea? Because now we are thinking about a new environment for technology in which interconnection means that data and information is now ubiquitous, but also is a flow of information. As Freire say, we are in a point of change from history to hyperhistory. He claims that history was when information and communication technologies were important for well-being, but now at this time of hyperhistory is essential. Our well-being is dependent of the information and communication technologies. Why this? Because this is what happens. Until the 80s or 90s, let's say, before internet, there were like 12 exabytes of information were produced in the whole history of humanity. By 2006, it was multiplied by 15 in only these kind of years. And now they are produced more than double than produced to 2006 every day, daily. I mean, this is a real exponential change and means that what is information now? What does it mean of information? That's a question that requires a new analysis, a new idea. I mean, most notions of information appeared before the 60s. I mean, like Shannon theories from the 40s, Kolmogorov, Chaitin Solomonov idea of algorithmic information theory is from the 60s. However, how much information there is and how it is processed changed drastically in the last century, in this century. And there is no really a new definition of information that can account for this transformation. Why this happens? Because, well, the population growth is more or less linear in this graphic, but somehow the connected devices grows exponentially, or look from the other side, the amount of connected devices, non-human connected devices to the internet grows and is more than 80% now of the total devices are non-human. This means that information that grows in the internet is produced and consumed by non-human devices. What happened that allow this is artificial intelligence, is called today. I mean, I'm not very fond of the term. In Chinese, and this is very interesting, it's called Ren Kong Chineng, and means person, work, wisdom, and an ability to do something, like the can in English. I mean, it means this artificial intelligence is associated in Chinese with human work and with wisdom. Bernard Stiegler, one of the most interesting followers of Simondon's philosophy, said that for anyone wanting a precise analysis of what we refer as to today's artificial intelligence, we seem how to have become the horizon of everyday life. And I will return to this question later. He said, it is necessary to begin from the following postulate. All noetic intelligence is artificial. I mean, artificial intelligence is somehow a pleonasm, is every intelligence would be, every noetic intelligence would be artificial. But what is AI? Nietzsche said that only thing that has no history can be defined, and AI has a long history. Minsky would say that artificial intelligence is a sign of making machines do things that would require intelligence if done by men or human beings. By artificial intelligence, I mean the use of computer programs and programming technique to cast light on the principle of intelligence in general and human thought in particular. Also, this is happening today. Or Herbert Simon's idea that we are doing always more complex human tasks doing in any way by computers. Kate Crawford used to claims that artificial intelligence is neither artificial nor intelligent. Why? Because it's embodied in material, because it's produced, as the Chinese clearly knew, by human labor, said Matteo Pasquinelli. Somehow, Bill Rappaport, with whom I agree in the concept I will present now, said that artificial connotes some idea of not real or something like that. He preferred to use the word synthetic as formed in a non-natural way, or better, computational. That is the nature of the synthesis. Not intelligent, said Crawford, because they are not autonomous, rational, or able to discern anything without extensive computational training, with large data sets. That's true. More reasonable to consider machine learning as an instrument of knowledge magnification, would say Giorgio Spacquinelli, and help to perceive future features, patterns, and correlations statistically through vast spaces of data beyond human reach. All this is clear. I agree with Rappaport on talking about computational cognition, not intelligence, something more general as cognition, not artificial, but something more specific as computational. Understanding by cognition a more general idea than intelligence. I agree with Dijkstra, who's a kind of was a computer science. He was in my university, originally in Eindhoven. Then he moved to Texas, and he had a very radical views of computing. I would criticize very much this idea of artificial intelligence. Said that the fathers of the field have been pretty confusing. John von Neumann speculated about computers and the human brain in analogies sufficiently wild to be worthy of a medieval thinker. And Alan Turing thought about criteria to settle the question of whether machine can think, a question of which we now know that is about as relevant as the question of whether submarines can swim. What Dijkstra claims here, and I agree, is that this anthropomorphic view of the so-called artificial intelligence or computational cognition hides more than reveals, and actually is misleading to understand what we are dealing with. Just to be quick, I just will say very few things more. One is that we have to understand, and this is a kind of methodological need, that we have to understand or that sometimes we're talking about computational systems in general. This has to do with the universality of Turing's idea that universal machines are the same machine for everything, but somehow the properties of universal systems are very few. And many times we try to understand machine learning programs as paradigm of things that are very different than that, or worse than that, computational assemblages. That means computation in the wild, the computation that works in the real world has very specific properties that many times are understood as properties of general computational system. And this is a mistake that is a kind of real difficulty to think correctly about how computation, the novelties of computation and mostly computational systems in society. I will skip some of these things. This idea I was saying is a kind of compositional fallacy of understanding properties of certain very particular forms of algorithms as the general properties of any algorithm. For example, when Rouvroy and Burns talk about computational, how they call it? Sorry, algorithmic governmentality. This idea is that this computational governmentality, algorithmic, talks about very particular form of algorithms. Actually, machine learning algorithms. So this idea is very interesting, but somehow misleads into thinking that any computational or any algorithmic governmentality will have these properties. I will skip all this and go to the end. My way of understanding this is following Kevin Kelly, one of the directors of or editors of the Wire magazine. He said that the mission of AI is not to make a human mind, but to explore the space of possible intelligence. This already said. And another Simondonian, another follower of Simondonian philosophy, Mark Hansen, would say, and this I claim is my position today, and I think one of the positions that can really honor the Latin American tradition in understanding computing society, like this place where I am in now refers, the operational room of Cybersyn. In concert with researchers like Andy Clark and Catherine Hayes, I embrace the technical distribution of cognition and perception as a way of understanding the complex coupling between human and machines that are typical in our contemporary world. I may add also agency, not only technical distribution of cognition and perception, but also of action, but that have in fact been part of human technogenesis since the very origin of the human. And I close with this idea of Dijkstra that I think we are in this precise moment today. Automatic computers have now been with us for a quarter of a century. He wrote this more than 15 years, more than almost 20 years ago. They have had a great impact on our society in their capacity of tools, but in that capacity, their influence will be but a ripple on the surface of our culture, compared with the much more profound influence they will have in their capacity of intellectual challenge, without precedent in the cultural history of mankind. We are really facing that, and I believe that the right step or the right direction to solve this puzzle is by co-evolution of mind machines and social organizations or political organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier. Thank you very much. We're taking many notes for the interchange at the end of the opponents. Thank you. Now I will introduce to Lina, Dr. Lina Marcela Gil Congote from Colombia, from the University of Antioquia. Are you here, Lina?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. You have the same space as Dr. Javier Blanco, so you can start. You can make, please, a brief introduce about you, and you can start with your points. I will put your text when you start.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, South Africa. And I would like to thank you for inviting me to participate in this event. Special thanks to Renzo, Filinich, and all the organizers. I'm a psychologist, and I have worked on the subject of the psychology of individuation. And my interest is the psychosocial perspective of Simondon. And I'm currently in my postdoctoral research on Bogota, and I'm studying the relation between individuation and phenomenology. This is my interest. You can put the test.
Okay, I will do now.
Okay.
I will share the text in the Google. Let me a second. Okay. Okay, now we got it in the Google too.
Thank you, Renzo. Okay, the title of my intervention is Simondon in the Global South, the problem of method. The paradox of the method. The question of method is an epistemological problem. There is a paradox with respect to method when establishing situate knowledge in context. It is true that without method, science cannot advance, but it is also true that method generates dependence on established models, especially in Latin America, because we have not advanced in this creation of our own paths of research. Theories have been appropriated, even interpretation of theories and doctrines, but we have not appropriated methods and processes to produce theories. If we take the main paradoxes in the project of philosophy in Latin America, we can draw consequences for thinking about the problem of appropriation of Simondon's work. First, universalism or regionalism. Second, method. Third, history. Fourth, themes. We start from the following thesis. In Latin America, it has been difficult to make variation and critiques of canonical methods, and the text has been more focused on application. This makes sense because our problems demand views and solutions from different disciplines. We cannot deny the possibility of entering into dialogue with Western canonical methods, nor can we eternally depend on them. If philosophy seeks the universal, the authentically human, the local is the starting point, the reference dimension of speculation. If it only attends to the universal, the cultural sense of its life work escapes. Another paradox emerges. Does the method determine the thing itself, Or does the thing itself, the phenomena, the problems, determine the method? It is the former, but can fall into determinism or a normalization of the discipline. It is the latter, one can force the word of life to accommodate it to the method, which is why it's necessary to temper the theories to make variation of the classical or canonical methods. The second part, the method in Simondon. Simondon opens a way to rethink the concept of individuation on which he generates a doctrine, shows its phases and components. Of course, the methods of access to individuation are enunciated and suggested again and again, but he tells us little about their application and how, in his own experience or research journey, he made use of them. Not finding in his work a characterization of the epistemic structure of the method of its procedure, step by step, further accentuates the paradox already stated. It is true that Simondon was always on the margins. In his time, he followed neither structuralism nor phenomenology, at least not in his canonical approaches. His most noble proposal, Algmatics, is an attempt to confront problems at a time when there are not only pure sciences, but also extra scientific fields and intersection between sciences, as in the case of cybernetics. This makes it difficult to define what the object of these sciences is and can lead, rather than to an epistemological problem, to a metaphysical problem. Quotation, this paradigm, the functioning of analogy, has a fundamental problem. It does not apply any method of verification other than that of functionality. Only the use of structural paradigms that work in some cases and not in others, but which happen not only in technology, but also in all interscientific disciplines, that is in the no man's land, which Simondon refers to. Of course, Simondon avoids falling into a merely pragmatic criterion or just a measuring instrument because he wants to overcome the traditional use of analogy and question any substantialist position. But in view of these limits of Simondon's method, it can be affirmed that there has not really been a process of validation of his theory, and perhaps it is not possible to achieve it with the tools he has left us. As is typical of the authors and interscientific thinking, it demands a dialogue between different disciplines, which is a certain way are renewed with the contribution of its researchers in the Simondonian community. Their previous interpretative frameworks, their interest and research in drifts and themes, technoaesthetics, digital war, governmentality, algorithmic, psychology, individuation is my case, etc., so that his work continues to live on and trans-individuate with and among us, or between us. It is a fact that in the South-South dialogue, the question of the universal is displaced to make room for the individual cultures, social and political processes in our horizon of expectation of singular participation in the global world. Among other topics, construction of identity, corporality, migration, violence, nostrity, intuition, reason, among others. The challenge is to recover reflection and action, of course, in an environment of massification, which some have called late capitalism. This dialogue requires especially to look again at individuation as a counterweight to bio, and psychopolitics. Third, a fact, realist phenomenology. In my work, I take up Simondon's thesis brought by his collaborator Bernard Ballan. There can be no true psychology before a theory of individuation. From his methodological pluralism with respect to psychology, he warns that it's not enough to aspire to the universality of phenomena, which can be given from philosophy or philosophical psychology, nor to limit oneself to measurement by experimental methods, positivist. It is necessary to link these two worlds, as well as the empirical and the theoretical. Faced with the paradox of the method and the validity it entails, our research has proposed the path of phenomenology on the realist side. In our position, Simondon makes a vetted description of the processes of individuation in the different phases. That is to say, he starts from a phenomena that is completely hyletic, real, physical, biological, even psychic processes, and it can be understood, or at least an access to understanding can be thought from a technical paradigm such as cybernetics. What is realist phenomenology? Phenomenology is characterized by the fact that there is a consciousness, whether it is called subject, cognition, noesis, mental state, representation, etc., and something noun, whether it is called hyletic pole, noema, object, etc. Phenomenology is a method that studies either of the way in which the world is given to us, its meaning, or of what there is, the entity. It is in the second direction that the realist path is configured, which assumed the need to abandon the subject and its thought processes as the ground of meaning. Such ground instead is the word, the giving of the word, reality. Our thesis is that when Simondon alludes to axiontology, the very stuff of research on individuation, transindividuation, he alludes both to the entity, even it is given itself as being, that is, to the modus essendi, and to the knowledge that it is possible to have it, that is, to the modus cognoscendi. Simondon thus postulates a realist phenomenology as axiontology. He shifts his interest from ontology, as substance, finished being or product, to ontogenesis as first philosophy from which any theory of knowledge derives. The Simondonian project is a scientific project that does not dispense with philosophy, but rather aspires to a unified field that derives in algorithmics or the science of transformation. Simondon says, this third discipline, synthesis of cybernetics and positivism, will not only be an axiology of wisdom, but also a knowledge of being. It will define the real relationship between the operation and the structure, the possible conversion from operation to structure and from structure to operation. This will be the scope of the discipline that we have called algorithmics. Simondon, therefore, did not abandon the methodological presupposition of phenomenology, but he did abandon the idea of the transcendental ego, of the transcendental constitution of meaning, and assumed a strong notion of reality as an ontological assumption. The realism of knowledge must be conceived as a relation. One can say the method for investigating individuation is realist phenomenology, or at least one of these methods. Through phenomenology, one has a methodological commitment. To realism, one assumes an ontological commitment. The axiological dynamism and the ontological structure are grasped through the metaphysics leading from natural to reflexive thought in phenomenological, non-phenomenal terms. The study of this teleological mechanism constitutes a true scientific phenomenology. Indeed, is not functions as facts which are studied, but only processes as processes, efficient and recurrent causality regimes. Norbert Wiener's mathematical research is a kind of eidetic reduction of technical or vital functions. It is then the style of phenomenology that can be called realist according to his proposal: nominalism for the knowledge of terms, realism for the knowledge of the relationship. If this postulate is valid, it is legitimate to ask the analysis of a particular point of the experimental sciences to reveal to us what the physical individuation is. Thus, by analogy, the regions underlying all phases or individuation will be known. To conclude, one might think that the adoption of phenomenology is another form of colonialism, or that it does not resolve the paradox method. But Husserl's motto, "go to the things themselves," always leads the way for knowledge to be situated, for theories not to take precedence over phenomena. Like cybernetics is a method, an attitude that always returns reflexively to what is, to what there is. Thank you so much. This is my intervention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lina, for your intervention. Another important aspect to Receiving Humanities today with a cybernetic epistemology, that is with the thinking of Dr. Javier Blanco in the same way, about rethinking a new computation theory today. Please, Dusan, now you have the space. You can briefly introduce yourself. I will stop the sharing here. Okay.
Okay. It's okay?
It's okay. It's okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renzo, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure for me to discuss such an important thinker as Gilbert Simondon. My name is Dusan Cotoras Straub. I'm a sociologist. I research cultural imaginaries about artificial intelligence. Currently, I'm working as a researcher at the Millennium Nucleus Futures of Artificial Intelligence Research here in Chile. This is a multidisciplinary project. And today, I like to explore Simondon's reception in Latin America through the lens of the cybernetics project. Specifically, I want to suggest that the current challenges posed by the paradigm of artificial intelligence can be better understood if we focus on Simondon's concept of allegmatics. This argument will be grounded in both the local context that shapes Simondon's reception in the region and the interpretation of the mode of existence of technical objects currently being developed by Latin American researchers. And first of all, I want to ask, why has Simondon become such an important figure in Latin America? Why, for instance, have most of his work been translated into Spanish before other languages? And why are there more and more research groups focusing on a thinker whose major contributions date back to the late 1950s? To begin with, Simondon's philosophy of technology is appealing because it helps us move past the colonial idea that technology is something external, created by Western culture or something else. Instead, his work offers us the chance to stop being seen as just resources or elements or tools for the global north, and instead become active technical individuals. Another key idea, another key aspect is the concept of the open machine, which invites us to explore how technology can be relevant for different environments, different contexts, in various places and ecosystems. And thirdly, he invites us to think about the trajectory of different technical lineages through the study of our technical inventions. In this sense, his work is a call to deal with the technical diversity, the techno-diversity that characterizes our own history. And I like to pause here because I find this point particularly relevant for understanding Simondon's place in Latin America thought, from my perspective. Perhaps unlike many other regions in the world, Latin America took on a leading role in the history of cybernetics. From the beginning, the Mexican scientist Arturo Rosenbluth collaborated with the father of cybernetics, Norbert Wiener, even before the publication of Wiener's famous work, Cybernetics, in 1948. But more significantly, it was the adoption of certain principles developed by Rosashby, such as the law of requisite variety, in a political project called CyberSyn, aimed at managing the Chilean economy in real time under the leading of Stafford Beer, that positioned Latin American cybernetics in a prominent place. For instance, the particular moment known as second-order cybernetics, where the focus on control shift to the importance of autonomy, reached its peak with the concept of autopoiesis, developed by the Chilean biologists Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela. Later on, Varela's idea of enactivism or enacted cognition will mark the final active phase of this movement, followed by a long period of silence. But what followed was a sense of disorientation among those who has studied the movement and understood its significance. Today, however, artificial intelligence has arrived as if we're a totally locked-in technology, originating from some genius mind in the global north and leaving us little choice but to adapt. And I like to come back to this point later, but before I do, I like to propose an hypothesis. Simondon's thought, more so than in other parts of the world, has filled the gap of the continuity of the cybernetic thinking in Latin America. Particularly in Chile, Simondon's thought has experienced a boom over the last 10 years. Without aiming for a systematic account, we could say that the project on the foundation of a relational ontology led by philosopher Cristóbal Durán in 2015 was one of the first academic approaches to Simondon's work here in Chile, after many advances in this direction, for example, in Argentina and other places. Similarly, influenced by Deleuze readings, Claudio Celis continued in 2017 with a project focused on the status of algorithms generated images based on Simondon's work and critiques by Stigler. In both cases, we can identify a clear interest in the concept of information, drawing from Simondon's thesis on individuation. And finally, starting in 2021, I, along with my colleague Rodrigo Gonzalez, organized a series of seminars on contemporary readings of the mode of existence of technical objects. This brought together researchers from different generations and disciplines, resulting in a collective book that is currently being edited, compiling some of the discussions that have taken place in Chile regarding Simondon's philosophy of technology in the light of contemporary thinking. And as part of this last experience, we set out to collectively review the contents of Simondon's secondary thesis, following a structure similar to that used in the original book. We asked ourselves, for example, what contemporary technical object we should examine, and to what extent it has changed from the original proposal. On the other hand, we also raised the question about contemporary technical culture. To what extent does today's capitalism reflect the pathologies described by Simondon? And how do his descriptions on automation align with the current development of artificial intelligence? And finally, we ask about the relationship between technicity and other modes of existence and types of thought compared to those described in the last part of the book. The first concern regarding the evolution of the concept used by Simondon was this desire to rethink technical concretization in terms of whether it can include social values or interest. This is based on Andrew Finberg's updated interpretation of the early reading of Simondon by Herbert Marcuse from Critical Theory. Regarding the evolution of technical reality, there is an ongoing debate about the need to redefine the differences between element individuals and assemblies in relation to data, algorithms, and platforms that reflect current digitalization process. And finally, there is an interest in considering acceleration of certain processes of individuation, for example, technical individuation, over other kinds of individuation, for example, psychosocial individuation, even suggesting the need to analytically delineate process of de-individuation. With regard to the relationship between culture and technology, the authors of this book in progress prefers to focus on the ways in which technology itself shapes Latin American culture through specific cases, rather than delving into a technical culture. For example, using terminology from German media theory to complement Simondon's work. Another key aspect of this part of the book is the interest in integrating Simondon's thought into a critique of the political economy of technology based on the concepts of algorithmic governmentality and alienation, aiming to build a technopolitics oriented towards emancipation. For example, we can look at some of the demos or protests from a few years ago in Chile that had no clear leaders but used technology to coordinate their actions. And finally, the account of the phases that follow the magical unity, detailed in the last part of the book, allows for a much broader range of connections between modes of existence that reflect the current entanglement characteristic of the Anthropocene. This also leads to an attempt to unify the differences that go beyond the binary of technical and culture, approaching the concept of cosmotechnics proposed by Duke Hui or cosmetics developed by Francois Diot, sources to introduce more clearly the role of nature or aesthetics in the constitution of common morality. And to conclude, I would like to propose that the alagmatic hypothesis instead of the cybernetic hypothesis, based on a science of operations among different modes of existence, can serve as an alternative form of artificial intelligence, or an alternative form of intelligence based on conventional cybernetics. If the cybernetics of control led to the cybernetic of autonomy, we might consider an extended cybernetics today that recognize these connections, these entanglements, these different modes of existence through trans-individual relationships, as suggested by Simondon. And this should especially allow us to adopt various technologies according to different contexts and complex relationships, rather than relying on a single reference model. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dusan. Thank you for explaining your future project of the book. Very, very, very important and necessary in the context, Latin American context, of course. As I saw in the three presentations, there is a connection between establish a new ways of modes of thinking into the humanities fields and into the humanities field, because Javier Blanco states too that computations need to be engaged with other ways of knowing and how we understand computation. It's an assemblage of ways of knowing too. Lina and the same aspects make us understand that the method, or why not methods, can be necessary into the aspects of how we create nowadays new epistemological perspective through techniques and through technological reappropriations nowadays. And of course, Dusan, in his own project research with the thinking of Simondon in Latin American thinking, show us the aspects of adoption, no, in the alagmatic thinking as an adoption of way of understand the alagmatic proposition of ways of knowledge in the proposition of Simondonian alagmatic. I want to leave open now the conversation discussion for you that are here. I don't know if some of you that are present have a question for the Latin American table, or maybe between each other, or somebody in the Google have a question too, before I open my own questions. Anybody here have any questions, reflections? Let me see. Or somebody between Lina or Dusan or Javier have any question to do each other, or interchange your own ideas? Okay, I will. Okay, Lina, please.
Maybe a relation that established with Dusan said, because it's very pertinent the perspective in activism. I'm working in this perspective right now, and it is very interesting the relationship cybernetics and phenomenology in the Varela's proposal, because it is the return to the body and embodied cognition to change the mental as abstraction or process or information. Maybe Dusan can broaden his perspective, because it's very interesting for psychology. And for me, it's a link, very, very fruitful, because it's the method, the realist, is applied, for example, neurophenomenology, and even in technical mentality, we can apply this perspective. And for me, this is a very fruitful dialogue, and I found this connection with you. Maybe you can say something more about it.
Thank you, Lina. Yes, I think that this last part, this late Varela, is very interesting, because that is precisely the limits of second order cybernetics from my view. The concept of structural coupling that mediate autopoietic systems, radical autonomous systems. And what is Varela trying to do with that concept of enactment is precisely to make operative that coupling, that kind of coupling. And maybe the focus on this entanglement is the crucial point of our next cybernetics. In my that is one way, because all these discussions around about the entanglement, from, for example, Don Haraway's last books, are precisely oriented to that line of flight, for say something. From that, in that way, the concept of trans individual is could be an functional equivalent of the enactment. I don't know, but I think that the limits of the obstacle behind the second order cybernetics is precisely that radical autonomy and the tautology in which falls that constructivist idea as a consequence of the autopoiesis. And that is one of the big challenges to explore a step further the last stage of cybernetics from my view. But so we can think maybe socio-technical enactments or enactments more than in a biological way from my view.
We have a question from Jaisa, please.
Hello, everyone from South Spain. I want to thank the organizers first because I've been listening to you all and it's been very interesting. I work in the field of aesthetics, precisely gustatory aesthetics. I'm focusing about how eating, ingesting can be an aesthetical practice. And I've been using Simondon for quite a while and also in activism. So building on your questions now, I wanted to ask about the collective, let's say, more than the social, the collective. For example, in aesthetics, in Western tradition, it's very common that we have the perspective of a single person having the aesthetic experience. It's like Renaissance pictures. They are painted for even not two eyes, but one eye to see. You see? So eating is also an individual thing in the sense that it's my mouth, it's me who is digesting. So it's quite individual, but at the same time, we realize how our body is not individual at all because we are eating the other and the experience is coming to our body and then happening. So all the frontiers blur somehow. So I wanted to ask both Lina and Dusan and everyone else that can have an answer, how to rethink through Simondon, not in terms of individual first, as phenomenology does, and Lina explained about the transcendental ego, but how methodologically really involve the fact that the individual is a result of a process. So it will be very interesting for me to think how we can be understood as a collective subject, a collective individuals, because with big brands, consumers are not any longer individuals, but we are collective or crowds, we could say. So maybe you have some words about that.
Thank you very much, Jaisa. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any of you wants to answer? Lina.
Yes. Thank you, Jaisa, for your question. And it is very interesting because maybe the first relationship between Simondon's conception and the psyche is the thesis of Varela that is living systems are cognitive systems, but his cognitive doesn't refer to the presence of cogito, of exclusively human reflection. It's very similar to Simondon because it's the capacity of the living to sense making. Is the core, the sense making. And this is one of the central points that we find. And for example, in the Simondon's extensive work on sensibility, for example. That's why it's a progress in individuation. From animals, even vegetables, from or to psyche and collective individuation. For me, one of the most important things in Simondon is the concept of trans-individual, because in an activism, it's a co-individuation. It's not only empathy in a transcendental sense. It's a gestural and embodied bodily connection with others. And it is very important, the relation with epistemological perspective and the ethical, even political perspective in the concept of trans individual. For example, right now I'm working with technical mentality for studying technical democracy, for example, the mentality in education, citizen education, because you can find axiology perspective, cognitive scheme, affected in multi-modalities, and even happen with others. It's a trans-individuation all the time in the perspective of development and in social and psychosocial perspective. That's why in activism, a cognition embodied, gestural, and communication with others, and for example, technical mentality, we can find the link in this dimension. For me, it was very fruitful. I don't know, Dusan and Javier.
Well, if I don't know, Dusan, if you want.
No,
Okay, I say a couple of things.
no, I can agree. I can add that an isolated individual from the Simondon's perspective is impossible. So the act to eat or whatever is always a collective activity or a process, but it's never an isolated process without an associated media or a milieu. That is what I can add to Lina. Javier.
Yeah, if I may, I want to say that somehow cybernetics is in a there are some proposal for a third moment, third cybernetics, or a third moment in cybernetics, and this third cybernetics is centered somehow for some of the authors into meta subjects or collective subjects. I mean, the first was about observing system, the second was about the observation itself, and the third would be about collectives. For example, this Lepsky in Russia said that. Even Raúl Espejo, that was one of the leaders of the CyberSyn project, is working in the same direction now. So I believe that we should focus now, following the idea that Dusan introduced, that is the idea of Stafford Beer, of the required variety as a need for any organization to deal with the complexity of the world. We need now to develop this a concept that we just presented 1 month ago, not only a technology of the self, as Foucault used to say, but I think a technology of ourselves. That means how to really create, have the conditions, the technological conditions to create collectives politically powerful in this new increased variety of the world, and with the difficulty to really have a effective action in this context.
Thank you very much, Javier, Dusan, and Lina. That's very important here in South Africa because in South Africa we have many cosmologies, use many language too, Zulu, Xhosa. I think it's more than 20 languages that are in the country, but how we can understand political, this various information that converge with all the systems, that is different perspectives, different points of view, the variety, how converging to the economical or productive situation in the countries are very important in the sense that you mentioned, is how ourselves create this technology of ourselves with our cognitive modulation, in our, with our own constitution, with the technology or this technical, socio-technical milieu, with the difference of each one, of course. This is a big challenge that I think so, and will be interesting to study more deepest. How was with the experience in CyberSyn? How Beer, with all the engineers working with the aspects of the aspects of varieties between the north, the south, and the central of Chile, a very, very long country with different perspectives, different points of view, different geographies, you know? So how put this into something that can be conversion in the production of a country, not only production of economy, production of knowledge too, and production in all the sense productions. How you can think in this aspect? I asking the question for just closing this table, each one. We can put in account the individuals, the trans individuations in the sense of Lina talking with these varieties of ways of thinking, with these different cosmologies or cosmotechnical perspective into a country that wants to emerge in these actions in different perspectives. Just open the question for the three of you, how you understand it from your own perspective.
Well, maybe one comment.
Okay, Lina, please.
And you refer variety and different mentalities. And in Colombia is the same in Latin America, because it's very important to attend the real context, the situation and the real context of people. For example, in Colombia, there is a lot of diversity, problems on discrimination, displacement, violence, and it's based on differences, because people doesn't accept the different. Because for me, in this phenomenological perspective and cybernetics perspective, we can work with this problem, and in psychosocial perspective at least, because it's situated in knowledge. For example, we work in educational institution with people very young, even with children, and they describe the experience to incorporate democracy, for example. But he lives in an environment, very violent environment. And for me, this method or this approach is very useful, because you can attend the singularity and at the same time, the horizon, common horizon, the community and trans individual. For me, trans individual is a kind of telos of the individuation. That's why you can display or express your personality, but in a common horizon. It's the tension, all the time is a tension between person and milieu or environment, even in institution or in general in our country, for example, to build democracy. It's only an example, but it's situated in knowledge, in my perspective, psychosocial perspective.
Thank you very much, Lina. Thank you very much. Somebody else wants to say something? We have a question here from the that is present. Please, Lolo.
Hello. First, thank you to the speaker. I guess I wanted to ask, and I don't know, I guess this is more to everyone, but I guess more specific to like Dusan and Javier. But when you say that AI is not autonomous, or that it has arrived as a pre-established system, is that related to the information that it's been trained and taught on? I mean, when I say the information, like I guess all the information that exists within the global south, global north, including like the biases. And I guess the question then becomes, how can it be retrained to operate within the global south? Which in I guess following along from Lina's train of thought about like the global south is still existing in this pluriversal, multi-contextual, multicultural view. Like, what would the way forward be? And then, I guess that's the question. Like,
I don't know. You can hear the question from Lolo, or we repeat it.
It's really, I didn't hear well.
But You want? I gonna ask him. He's gonna come here and say him from my microphone. It's
Okay.
better. Yeah. Yes. Please. This microphone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, better. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess the question that I have is just kind of putting everything together. It's when you say that, I guess the question is, when you say that AI is not autonomous or that it has arrived as a pre-established or I guess an established system into the global south, is that related to the information that it's been trained on, and that I guess also includes the biases that the global north has, and all the isms, and how can it? And then I guess the follow-up question would then be, how can it be retrained to operate within the global south? Which I guess following all Lina's thinking and her intervention, is this multicultural and like I guess borrowing from I get this person's name, but like this, it's a sort of reversal existence which has so many facets to it. Like, what would be a way to work through and work and rework and reframe AI to an extent, but also just like I guess let's stick with AI, I guess.
Maybe Javier.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this. First thing is that I'm not very over fond of AI. I think it's a technology that should be, at least this current state of AI means machine learning algorithms developed by a huge amount of data. Somehow this technology, this is one very interesting thing, that is the only technology in the last, let's say, 50 years that can only be developed by big corporations. I mean, computer programming is something that any programmer can do at home and do a perfect job, except now it's the only technology that is private for big corporations. Actually, machine learning is developed in a 99% by private corporations with a profit objective. So this is really a very new technology in this sense, whereas programming in general is not the case. There is a really wide amount of different ways of development. Free software, for example, but not only. I mean, like, there are many, many ways to develop software, but somehow not artificial intelligence. So this is the political problem. I don't believe that this kind of statistical programming, statistical classifiers that are constructed by this kind of method is really the best technology available. I mean, it's just one moment that has certain properties. It's useful, of course, but it has also many shortcomings intrinsic of this technology. So I don't think that the challenge is to develop our own statistical classifiers and our own language models, but how to work on different approaches to computational mediations. That is the general idea that I'm addressing, and also integrate these kind of systems in a different way. I mean, like for example, I mean, like the how the data are produced and who is the owner of this data is one of the problems that we are now facing. This friend of mine, Rita Segato, is an anthropologist. She used to say that the interaction in anthropology or sociology between North and South was always that theories came from the North to the South and data went from the South to the North. This is somehow also happening in this kind of infrastructure of the data that are now processed by the North and come to the South as other things. We have to change this. We can also change this way of doing things, but somehow also by somehow evolving from this kind of machine learning technologies.
Okay, Renzo.
Yeah, I guess I was hoping that maybe I could get more from like Dusan and Lina as well.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Javier. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dusan. Thank you very much, Lina, for your reflections bringing here. We need to make a break now from 10 minutes, and we're gonna change to the Brazilian colleagues in the Brazilian perspectives about the recession of Simondon in Brazil. And I must say that from our own perspectives as Latin Americans, we take in account very profound our socio-technical conditions nowadays, because we have a long history of technological, how can I say this in English? Technological engaged to alienation, using this notion from Simondon. The alienation of technology was a long history for us in Latin America, and I suppose it's from all the global south the same, that how we can break this alienation of technology from the north, how we can engage in this mediation from our own perspective and reflecting about that, have our own critical reflection is one important challenge today, especially in the universities teaching this kind of thinkings to the students, to the new generations that are more engaged with technological devices that used to be 50 years ago. But changed. Every time have a different mutation. So thinking this kind of suspension, taking into account the notion of epoche from Stigler, how we taking this suspension of in this technological condition today, and how we start again in this reset from our local perspective is a challenge. And this kind of reflection that you bring today, our own research from our own places are necessary for can bring these reflections in these new generations. Thank you again, Dusan. Thank you again, Javier, and thank you again, Lina. We want to still in contact, of course. This is only a beginning. I hope so. It's only a beginning from this interchange, global sound interchange. So I appreciate it very much, and I'm very grateful for your presence today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Bye, Javier and Dusan. It's a pleasure to.
Ciao. Bye.
Ciao.
Okay, we'll continue.